Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another PS5 Jailbreak news update. So we have a lot of updates to get into over the past 2 weeks since my last official Jailbreak news update. Obviously, I have been covering a lot of the individual releases in separate videos, but I'm going to compile it all here in this video, along with a lot of the latest updates. So let's go ahead and dive straight into it. Okay, so let's start off with the biggest piece of news, of course, which is the release of 5.50 Kstuff on the PS5. So if you are on firmware 5.50, you can now attempt to load this new test build of Kstuff on your console, and that might allow you to, of course, run your PS4 fake packages finally. Not only that, but there's also the etaHEN 2.0 pre-release build, which also, I believe, works with 5.50, so you can load that first and then load the Kstuff payload second, so that you can basically have, you know, etaHEN mostly fully up and running. Of course, if you're on a 5.10 firmware, it actually has been fully integrated with etaHEN pre-release build. That specific build is accessible on a few hosts, like you've got Zeko's host, which you can access from es7in1.site. You can access it there and load that version. And then there's also a version from Moor1 and a few other different versions that also include the new etaHEN build that's integrated the 5.10 Kstuff. So you can just load that and it will load etaHEN with Kstuff integrated on 5.10. But obviously if you're on 5.50, it's only just been released, so you'll have to load it separately for now. And also the other 5.x firmwares are being currently worked on. So 5.0 and 5.02, they are in the works, so we can expect to see those follow shortly. Now we can see here that EchoStretch has also mentioned that they are working on 7.61 Kstuff, and if that happens, it will truly be a seismic shift in the status quo for PS5 jailbreaking, bringing consoles up to 7.61 to the same level of support that we've had for a long time on firmwares like 3.0 to 4.51. There's also been some major improvements to getting PS5 game dumps working. So we've seen from Speed-007 on Twitter a few more games that have been successfully dumped and turned into working backups, like the Callisto Protocol, and a couple of other ones that I believe require 6.x firmwares in order to dump them. So the self-decrypter was untested on 6.x and was not working on 7.x initially. However, that has now changed, so apparently it was actually working on 6.x firmwares, it just wasn't tested. But now we've got people testing it on 6.x firmwares and it appears to be working. Not only that, but EchoStretch has actually managed to fix it for 7.x firmwares too, which means we can now successfully decrypt our games all the way up to firmware 7.61. I was testing this on my 7.61 system yesterday and was able to successfully decrypt 2 games on my 7.61 console, The Last of Us Part 1 and God of War Ragnarok, which both seem to decrypt successfully, although when turning them into a backup and trying to run them on my 4.03 system just results in a black screen. So obviously there are still some issues getting those games working. But the fact that we can dump games all the way up to 7.61 means the pool of PS5 games that could potentially be turned into working backups is much larger than before. Initially, it was only games up to the release of 5.0, which basically was games up until about, you know, April 2022, which was the cutoff point for games that we could try and turn into working backups. Now with 7.61 being able to decrypt games, the pool of games that we can essentially turn into working backups goes all the way up to about October or November of 2023 versus before, which was about April 2022. So a big jump there in the number of games that can be potentially dumped and turned into working game backups. Obviously, there'll still be a lot of work that's required individually on the games to try and fix certain games to allow them to run as game backups through items flow, and that work obviously continues. But yeah, definitely exciting that a lot more games will potentially be turned into working backups. Not only that, but the downgrade script from IdleSauce has also been updated. So this is the script that allows you to basically patch the executables for games that are dumped on higher firmwares to change their target SDK version to an older SDK version to try and allow them to launch on older firmwares. So this has now been updated so that you can actually specify the PS4 and PS5 target SDK versions to patch the executables to. So that has now been changed as well, along with, I guess, some other improvements included in there. So that is another update there. So moving on from the game backup situation, another thing I thought I would mention here is that there's a new project that's popped up on GitHub from the developer of the Apollo save tool, which is Apollo PS5. So it looks like development has begun on a PS5 version of the Apollo save tool. There's no code on this repo at the moment, but this should at least give us a sign that development has begun on this PS5 version. So we'll have to wait and see if this ends up initially just being a port of the PS4 version on PS5, which would still be very useful, but would only target PS4 save files on the PS5. But again, that would still be very, very useful compared to just being able to use the save mounter, which is the only option we have right now for managing PS4 saves on the PS5. So an Apollo save tool port would be very handy. Although what would be even more amazing is if it could also do something with PS5 saves, like being able to mount PS5 saves and export the decrypted save data and import decrypted save data from PS5 save files, since we're not really able to do anything with PS5 saves at the moment. So yeah, no code yet in the repo, but it looks like development on a PS5 version has begun. There's also been some new plugins released for etaHEN, one of them being a game debug message error patch, which basically allows you to patch out those universal data registration error messages when running a PS5 game backup. These messages normally pop up when you first launch the game, but there are some games where it will spam a bunch of these error messages every so often, like a Plague's Tale Requiem, which is obviously highly distracting when you're trying to play the game. So this etaHEN plugin will patch those error messages out so they'll no longer appear on screen when you're launching your PS5 game backups, so that you can play your game in peace. Definitely a handy feature that's been added there. We also got the release of a new payload called AirPSX that has also been turned into an etaHEN plugin. So this plugin allows you to connect to your PS5 through a remote desktop running in your web browser, which can give you access to a file manager to access the console remotely. You can also do things like back up your save files. There's also going to be a package installer included in a future version. Not only that, but you can schedule tasks to run on your PS5. You can run scripts on your PS5, you can get your console information, and you can also do one of my favorite features of this is being able to remotely launch applications from the browser on your computer as well. So you can just select a game or an app that you want to run and it will launch it on the console, and you can go straight from one application into another. So I can go straight from one game and then launch another game and it will just jump straight to it without having to return to the main menu first or close the original game. It all happens in the background. So yeah, really awesome feature that's been added here. There's been a few more updates to this as well. So we also got the release of a installer for the plugins from Moore1. So this is a package file that you just install onto the PS5, and then when you run it, it will extract the plugins to the data folder on the hard drive, to the etaHEN plugins folder, so that you don't have to copy the plugins manually with FTP. So that's now been added. It will also install the icons so that you can use AirPSX from the browser on the PS5 itself, so it all displays properly on the PS5. Obviously, AirPSX is mainly intended to be used on a remote device like your computer, so you can remotely install package files and access the file system, but it can be handy to have access to it on the console itself through a web browser shortcut. So that is all included here with this new installer as well. So I'll leave that all linked down in the video description. And since I recorded this, the latest version of this installer has also now included the cheats for etaHEN 2.0b, so it will also install the latest cheat files along with everything else. Now there's also been some updates to the jar loader from Hammer83 with the Blu-ray drive version of the exploit, so it's now been updated to version 4.1.0, and this now includes the jailbreak payload in the actual menus inside the full version of the ISO. So when you write the ISO file to a Blu-ray disc, and put that in your PS5, inside the menu you'll now have the jailbreak payload. So if you want to access like root FTP through the Blu-ray drive exploit, then what you can do is basically access the menu once you have the Blu-ray disc loaded, and then go down and select the UMTX option first to run the kernel exploit. Once that's successful, you can press X to return to the menu, then run the jailbreak payload, which should now work. Previously you had to inject the jailbreak payload separately, otherwise it would freeze the menu. So now that's no longer a problem with this new version, so you can now select the jailbreak payload next, which will allow it to escape the sandbox. And then once that's done, you can return again with X back to the menu, and then run the FTP server to get root FTP access. Again, the username for FTP is PS5 JB, and then the port number is 9225, and you'll be able to connect and get root access. Another improvement with this version is that you should now have access to some directories that were previously not loading. So previously the user folder, for example, would just be blank in the previous versions, but with the version 4.1.0, once you load everything correctly, you should be able to get access to those directories that were previously not showing any files or folders. So now the user directory is fully accessible with this version of FTP. So that is now being improved. And finally, there's also an ELF loader that is work in progress using the Blu-ray drive version of the exploit. So this has been added, but it's currently not working in its current state, but it is being worked on. So obviously the ELF loader would be very useful. We can run the ELF loader using the Lua version of the exploit, as I've shown in my Lua exploit guide. So you can basically use the Lua version of the exploit to load the ELF loader, and that would certainly be useful with the Blu-ray drive. It's obviously not necessary because you could potentially, I guess, port a lot of the ELF loader payloads over as jar files and load them that way instead with the jar loader. But obviously for convenience, it would just be handy if it could load the existing ELF loader. That way it would already be compatible with existing payloads that are already out there, instead of having to rework a lot of payloads to be loaded as jar files with the Blu-ray drive exploit. So that is something that we will hopefully see. It is definitely being worked on, but there do seem to be some issues with getting it working at the moment. And speaking of the Lua version of the exploit, we also got a new backup released from Master S9, which now includes the Hamadashi creative save file. So his backups should include all of the remote Lua loader save files to load the Lua version of the exploit included in that backup, so you can just restore that backup file. And then no matter which Artemis engine game that you have, you'll be able to load it up, and it should load the save file with the remote Lua loader so that you can then send the Lua payloads to execute on your console. So that is now available too. So those are all of the main updates that have been happening in the PS5 jailbreaking scene this week, with hopefully a lot more to come very soon. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And once again, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.